To evaluate algebraic expressions, we're going to need some key terms. First one is variable. Now, a variable is a letter. Mostly we use a letter, but it can be a letter or a symbol that is used to represent an unknown number or an unknown quantity. Right now we're just going to do a number. So next, an algebraic expression. Well, we already talked about numerical expressions, which is numbers and operations. But an algebraic expression, at the very least, is a letter or a variable. At the most, it's variables and numbers and operations. And operations refers to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Now, linear expressions. Now, linear expressions can either be a constant, and when we say a constant, we mean a number by itself, or the product of a constant and a variable. So, like 2x. But that variable has to be to the first power, meaning that it's not x squared or even x to the 1/2. It's just raised to the single power. So some examples, like I said, 2x, or just x. Make that 2 look a little bit better. 1/2 x minus 4. We didn't talk about how you can add or subtract, but that's still a constant. Negative 3 plus 4.75x. Oops. Well, and it doesn't even have to be x. You know, like 4y. It could be any variable. But notice that none of them have a squared on them. So examples of ones that would not be a linear expression would be something like x squared, or 2x squared, or 4.75y squared. These would all not be. Even, let's say, 5xy. See, now we're multiplying variables, so we can't multiply variables, just a constant and a variable, and all these exponents. So these all would not be linear expressions. So now a constraint is a condition that a solution must satisfy. So we know about constraints, like on eBay, if you want to sell something but you want to get at least $25, you can start the bidding at 1 penny if you want, but you can set that constraint on it there. So if you don't get at least a bid of $25, then it doesn't sell and you can relist it. And the last term we're going to talk about is evaluate an algebraic expression. Now, we've talked about this in class, that evaluate means to substitute and solve. Substitute meaning replace all the variables with their values, and then solve meaning that we do all possible operations in the order of operations. So now let's do a few examples. Let's evaluate negative x minus 12 for x equals 3, 18, and negative 9. So these are going to be 3 separate problems or solutions. So notice, and I want to point this out, that the negative on the x is completely separate from the x itself. And one way we show this in our work is by putting negative and then substitute the value of x in parentheses, 3. And this is going to help us when we get to the negative 9 and be able to understand that. Minus 12. Well, and really, remember, a negative in math represents the opposite. So the opposite of x. Well, if x equals 3, the opposite of x is negative 3. And negative 3 minus 12. Now, you can either do that, or something that I encourage people to do is to rewrite subtraction as addition. So negative 3, and the way we turn subtraction into addition is to leave the first number alone, change the subtraction to addition, and then use the opposite of the second number. And that equals negative 15. So we've got 18. So negative, or the opposite of 18 minus 12. And this time I'm going to do both in one step. I'm going to turn that into, well, the opposite of 18 is negative 18 plus negative 12. But remember, taking the opposite of the first number had nothing to do with adding the opposite. Other than it gets us, because they're both negatives, we now add them and keep the same sign. Negative 30 would now be the solution. And the last one, which was, this is the one I wanted to get to, the opposite of negative 9, minus 12. So the opposite of negative 9 is 9. And if I'm going to show all my steps, I'm just going to do that first, and then I'm going to turn the subtraction into addition, so 9 plus negative 12. And now we're adding two numbers with opposite signs or different signs, so we find their difference, which is 3. And the one farther from 0 is the negative, so my solution would be negative 3. So then they might give you a table, and they'll put like G, and let's go with like negative 2G plus 5. And then they'll give you some values, like let's say 4, negative 3, 2, 0, negative 1. It doesn't matter how many they give you. You're still going to replace G with each one of those. But now I'm going to show my work off to the right side. So I still just rewrite it using the value that they've given me. So negative 2, I always substitute in parentheses to remind me that that's multiplication. Negative 2G means negative 2 times G plus 5. So this is we're gonna do the order of operations. We multiply first. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. Now there's just addition, and the signs are different, so I find the difference, and I keep the sign of the one farther from 0, which is the negative 8. So negative 3 would be the answer here. So negative 2 times negative 3 plus 5. So negative 2 times negative 3 is positive 6, and positive 6 plus 5 is 11. Negative 2 times 2 plus 5. So negative 4 plus 5. The signs are the opposite, so I find the difference. And the farther one from 0 is positive, so I keep it positive. Then negative 2 times 0. This will be a fun one. Well, it's easy to do the multiplication, right? It's just going to be 0 plus 5. And that equals 5, of course. And then negative 2 times negative 1 plus 5. So that equals positive 2 plus 5. And that equals 7. Alright, well let's try one in a, well, and they could also have the table sideways, long this way, so then they could have had the G here, and they could have had the negative 2G plus 5, and then they could have had 4 and negative 3. So don't let that throw you off. It's not as easy to show your work this way, other than you just want to put more spaces in between it, so negative 2 times 4 plus 5. So I wouldn't want the negative 3 that close. But then you can show your work vertically, negative 8 plus 5, then your solution negative 3. So that's another way you can show your work.